A lonely widow saved a stray cat, not realizing it would lead her to a new love. This thought would have seemed absurd to Eleanor Wright 6 months ago, when grief still wrapped around her heart like barbed wire. Back then, the very idea of another chance at happiness felt like a betrayal to Richard's memory. Rain pelted the kitchen window as Eleanor stood motionless, the dinner plate in her hand meant for one. Just one. Always one. The silence in the house pressed against her eardrums, a constant reminder of Richard's absence. 15 months. 457 days since the funeral. Not that she was counting. She placed the plate on the table with mechanical precision. The ritual was always the same. One setting, one chair pulled out, one napkin folded into a perfect triangle. The house creaked and settled around her, its emptiness a living, breathing thing. At 62, Eleanor had resigned herself to this half-life. Her daughter Claire called twice a week from Seattle, her voice bright and forced. "You should join a club, Mom. Or maybe try one of those senior dating sites." Eleanor always responded with a gentle laugh and a change of subject. How could she explain that the thought of letting someone new into her heart felt like erasing Richard? That the very act of moving on seemed like admitting he was truly gone? Outside, the November rain turned to sleet, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. Eleanor sat at the table, fork moving between plate and mouth without tasting the food. The television murmured in the background, not for entertainment, but for the illusion of company. The sound came so faintly at first that Eleanor thought she'd imagined it, a small, pitiful cry from somewhere outside. She paused, fork suspended in air, and listened. There it was again, a desperate mewling that pierced through the drumming of sleet. Eleanor set down her fork and moved to the back door, pulling her cardigan tighter around her thin shoulders. The porch light illuminated a small patch of her backyard, the grass glistening with ice. The cry came again, more urgent now. "Hello?" she called, feeling foolish. The wind whipped her voice away. She stepped onto the porch, flinching as cold air stung her cheeks. The crying stopped momentarily, then started again, coming from beneath the weathered garden shed. Eleanor hesitated. She hadn't ventured into the garden since Richard's death. He had been the one with the green thumb, coaxing roses and tomatoes from the soil while she watched from the kitchen window. Now the garden lay untended, wild and overgrown. Another plaintive cry made her decision. Eleanor grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and pulled on Richard's old rubber boots, still by the door where he'd left them. The wet grass soaked the hem of her slacks as she picked her way across the yard. Kneeling painfully on the cold ground, she pointed the flashlight beneath the shed. 2 eyes reflected back, glowing green in the beam of light. A small, bedraggled cat, fur-matted and filthy, cowered in the farthest corner. "Oh, you poor thing," Eleanor whispered. The cat hissed weakly, pressing itself further back. Eleanor returned to the house, moving with more purpose than she had in months. She found an old towel and opened a can of tuna, Richard's favorite, still in the pantry because she couldn't bear to throw away his things. Back at the shed, she placed the tuna just within reach of the shelter and backed away. Minutes passed as she stood in the sleet, her thin cardigan growing damp, watching as the cat's hunger finally overcame its fear. It crept forward, never taking its eyes off her, and began to eat. Eleanor could count every rib beneath the matted fur. One ear was notched, and it favored its right front paw. "You've had a rough time too, haven't you?" she murmured. The cat paused in its desperate eating, regarding her with suspicious eyes before returning to the food. Eleanor knew she should go back inside. The sensible Eleanor, the one who had emerged after Richard's death, would never consider taking in a stray animal. It would be messy, unpredictable. It would disrupt the careful order she had constructed from the wreckage of her life. Instead, she found herself sitting on the wet ground, ignoring the cold seeping through her clothes, waiting as the cat finished eating. "I don't expect you to trust me," she told it softly. "God knows I wouldn't." The cat licked the empty can clean and then, to Eleanor's surprise, took a tentative step toward her. She held her breath as it sniffed her outstretched fingers, whiskers twitching. "That's it," she encouraged. "I'm not going to hurt you." The sleet turned back to rain, heavier now. The cat looked up at the sky with evident displeasure, then back at Eleanor, seeming to make a calculation. "Would you like to come inside?" Eleanor asked, hardly recognizing her own voice. How long had it been since she'd spoken this gently to anyone? "Just until the storm passes." As if understanding, the cat took another step forward. With slow movements, Eleanor wrapped the towel around the trembling animal. It stiffened but didn't struggle as she lifted it against her chest. Its body felt light, too light, and radiated a feverish heat. Back in the kitchen, under the harsh fluorescent light, the cat looked even worse. Its gray fur was clumped with mud and what looked like oil. One eye was crusted half shut, and its breathing came in rapid, shallow pants. Eleanor's dinner sat forgotten on the table as she filled the sink with warm water. "This won't be pleasant for either of us," she told the cat, which watched her with wary resignation from its towel bundle on the counter. To her surprise, the cat submitted to the bath with only token resistance, as if too exhausted to fight. As she worked the mild dish soap through its fur, Eleanor found herself talking, really talking, for the first time in months. "Richard was allergic to cats, you know. Terribly allergic. We had a cat when we were first married. Pilot, we called him. Richard loved that cat so much he'd take antihistamines every day and still sneeze his way through the evenings." The cat blinked slowly at her, water dripping from its whiskers. "When Pilot died, we both cried for days. Richard said, 'No more cats.' My heart can't take it. And now?" Her voice caught. She rinsed the soap from the cat's fur in silence, remembering Richard's face, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The clean cat was revealed to be a scrawny female with soft gray fur and white paws. Eleanor dried her gently and examined the injured paw, which appeared sprained rather than broken. "You need a vet," she said, "but that will have to wait until morning." She made a bed from an old blanket in a cardboard box and placed it near the heating vent. The cat limped in a circle before settling down, eyes fixed on Eleanor. "Don't get too comfortable," Eleanor warned, though the sternness in her voice felt forced. "This is temporary." That night, for the first time since Richard's death, Eleanor slept without a sleeping pill. She woke once, startled to find the cat had somehow escaped the box and curled against her side, in the empty space where Richard used to sleep. She should shoo it away. She'd never intended to let it on the bed, but the warm weight against her ribs was oddly comforting. Instead, she laid a hesitant hand on the cat's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of its breathing. "Just for tonight," she whispered into the darkness. Morning brought weak November sunshine and a decision. The cat needed a vet, which meant Eleanor needed to leave the house, something she rarely did anymore except for necessary errands. Her social withdrawal had been so gradual she hardly noticed it happening, like water slowly turning to ice. She called the local veterinary clinic, speaking more words to the receptionist than she'd spoken to anyone besides Claire in weeks. "Doctor, Martinez had a cancellation. He can see you at 11, the young woman said cheerfully. Eleanor looked at the cat, now exploring the living room with cautious interest. "We'll be there." The waiting room of Lakeside Veterinary Clinic smelled of antiseptic and dog treats. Eleanor sat rigidly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, the cat carrier on her lap. Inside, the cat had retreated to the back, only her eyes visible in the shadows. "She seems calmer today," Eleanor told the middle-aged woman sitting next to her, who was struggling with an enormous Labrador puppy. "Last night She stopped, suddenly self-conscious. When had she become someone who chatted with strangers? First-time cat owner? The woman asked kindly. "Oh no, I'm not keeping her," Eleanor said quickly. "I'm just helping her until—" The woman smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that made Eleanor's chest tighten. "That's what I said 3 dogs ago." Before Eleanor could respond, a door opened and a tall man in a white coat appeared. "Ms. Right in ... He consulted his clipboard. "Unnamed cat?" Eleanor stood, clutching the carrier. The veterinarian was younger than she expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with salt-and-pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag read Dr. Daniel Martinez. "That's us," Eleanor said, following him into the examination room. "Doctor?" Martinez moved with quiet efficiency, his hands gentle as he examined the cat, who tolerated his touch with surprising patience. "She's malnourished and has a mild upper respiratory infection, but nothing antibiotics won't fix," he said, listening to the cat's chest with his stethoscope. "The paw is just a sprain. She's about 3 years old, I'd say, and has been spayed." He looked up at Eleanor with warm brown eyes. "Has she been eating well since you found her?" "Yes. She seems to prefer tuna, but I gave her some chicken this morning." He nodded approvingly. "Good protein. She's lucky you found her before this cold snap gets worse." He stroked the cat's head and she leaned into his touch. "Have you thought of a name?" "I'm not keeping her," Eleanor said automatically. "Doctor." Martinez's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes made Eleanor feel he didn't believe her. "Of course. Well, she'll need these antibiotics twice daily for 10 days. And this ointment for her eye." He demonstrated how to give the medicine, his fingers brushing against Eleanor's as he handed her the dropper. It had been so long since someone other than her daughter had touched her, even accidentally, that Eleanor almost flinched. "Do you know of anyone looking for a cat?" she asked as she put the medicine in her purse. "Once she's healthy, I mean." "Doctor." Martinez was typing on his computer. "We have a bulletin board for adoptions in the lobby. I can help you create a listing when she's recovered." He glanced at her over his glasses. Though sometimes these temporary arrangements have a way of becoming permanent. Eleanor thought of the cat curled against her side in the night, the strange comfort of its warmth. "Not this time." "Doctor." Martinez smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Well, bring her back in 10 days and we'll see how she's doing. Call if you have any concerns before then." Back home, Eleanor administered the medicine with nervous hands, speaking soothingly to the cat the entire time. "There, that wasn't so bad, was it, Doctor? Martinez said you're going to be just fine." The cat blinked at her and then headbutted her hand, the first truly affectionate gesture she'd made. Eleanor felt something shift inside her chest, like ice beginning to crack. "You still need a name," she said, stroking the soft fur. "Just for the paperwork." The cat stretched, and then curled up in a patch of sunlight on the couch. Richard's spot. "Sunshine?" Eleanor decided. "That's what I'll call you. Just until we find your forever home." Days passed and Sunshine grew stronger. Her fur became sleek, her eyes bright. The limp disappeared. She followed Eleanor from room to room, a silent companion as Eleanor went about her daily routines. Eleanor found herself talking to the cat constantly, at first feeling foolish, then finding an unexpected solace in it. She told Sunshine about Richard, how they'd met in college, their 38 years together, his passion for gardening and old Western movies, the way cancer had whittled him away so quickly at the end. "I wasn't ready," she confessed one evening as they sat together on the couch, Sunshine purring in her lap. "We were supposed to have more time." Sunshine lifted her head and blinked slowly, as if to say, "Aren't we all?" The house felt different with the cat in it, less like a mausoleum, more like a home. Eleanor found herself opening curtains that had remained closed for months, letting light spill across the hardwood floors where Sunshine loved to bask. One morning, Eleanor noticed the garden tools in the shed while retrieving an old basket for Sunshine to sleep in. She paused, running her fingers over the handles worn smooth by Richard's hands. On impulse, she took the pruning shears and stepped into the overgrown garden. An hour later, her back aching, hands filthy, Eleanor stood amid the pruned rose bushes. They were dormant now, but come spring they would bloom again. The thought brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Sunshine appeared at her side, investigating the freshly turned soil with interest. "What do you think?" Eleanor asked her. "Should we plant something new in the spring?" The word hung in the air, a tacit admission. That night, Claire called. "You sound different, Mom," she said after they'd chatted about Claire's work and the grandchildren. "More present." "Do I?" Eleanor watched Sunshine batting at a stray thread on the armchair. "I've been keeping busy." "With what?" Eleanor hesitated. "I've, taken in a stray cat. Temporarily," she added quickly. Claire's surprise was audible. "A cat? Does it have a name?" "Sunshine," Eleanor admitted. "She was in bad shape, but the vet says she's doing much better now." "The vet? You've been going out?" Eleanor felt a flush of embarrassment at her daughter's obvious astonishment. Had her withdrawal been that complete? "Just for the cat," she said. "She had a follow-up appointment today, actually." "And how was that?" Claire's voice was carefully neutral, but Eleanor could hear the hope beneath it. Eleanor thought of Dr. Martinez's warm smile as he'd examined Sunshine, the way he'd asked about Eleanor's garden when she mentioned clearing it out. The easy conversation that had flowed between them, surprising her with its naturalness. "It was nice," she said finally. "Doctor Martinez is very good with animals." "Dr. Martinez?" There was a new note in Claire's voice. "Is he young?" "Not particularly," Eleanor said, though in truth she hadn't thought about his age. She'd noticed his hands, gentle, competent, and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he'd listened intently when she'd mentioned Richard, not changing the subject or offering platitudes. "You should invite him for coffee," Claire suggested, "as a thank you for taking such good care of Sunshine." "Don't be ridiculous," Eleanor said automatically, though the idea sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. "He's just the vet." But after they hung up, Eleanor found herself wondering what Daniel Martinez did on his days off, whether he liked gardening, whether he drank coffee or tea. "This is absurd," she told Sunshine, who was grooming herself with single-minded focus. "I'm too old for whatever this is." Sunshine paused in her bathing to give Eleanor a look that seemed distinctly judgmental. The next day, Eleanor called the clinic to schedule Sunshine's final checkup. Her heart beat a little faster when the receptionist said, "Doctor, Martinez has an opening on Friday at 4. Would that work?" "Yes, that's fine," Eleanor said, trying to sound casual. After hanging up, she stood before her closet for a long moment before selecting a blue sweater that Claire had said brought out her eyes. She held it against herself, looking in the mirror. A woman she barely recognized looked back, thinner than she remembered, with more silver in her chestnut hair, but with a spark in her eyes that had been missing for a very long time. "This is ridiculous," she told her reflection, but she laid the sweater out for Friday anyway. The clinic was quiet when Eleanor arrived with Sunshine. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Doctor, Martinez is just finishing up with another patient. He'll be with you shortly." Eleanor sat in the waiting room, absently stroking Sunshine through the carrier mesh. The door to the back opened and Dr. Martinez emerged, showing out a teenager with a guinea pig. His face brightened when he saw Eleanor. "Miss, right? Good to see you. And how is our patient today?" "Our patient." The simple phrase shouldn't have warmed her the way it did. In the examination room, Sunshine allowed Dr. Martinez to examine her without protest. "She's made a remarkable recovery," he said, running his hands along her sides. "You've done an excellent job with her." "She made it easy," Eleanor said, oddly proud. "She's very determined." Dr. Martinez smiled at that. "Animals often reflect their owners' personalities." "Oh, I'm not—" Eleanor began automatically, then stopped. She thought of Sunshine sleeping on her bed every night, of the cat toys she'd bought, of the way she looked forward to seeing the little gray face each morning. "I suppose I am her owner now," she admitted. Dr. Martinez's smile deepened. "I thought that might happen." He hesitated, then added, "I'm glad. She's lucky to have found you." "I think perhaps we found each other," Eleanor said softly. There was a moment of silence, broken only by Sunshine's purring. Dr. Martinez cleared his throat. "Well, she's in perfect health now. You don't need to bring her back unless something changes." He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "Though we do offer a senior pet wellness program that includes regular checkups." "She's only 3, Eleanor pointed out. "True." He met her eyes. "But it's never too early to think about long-term care." Eleanor felt a flutter of something she hadn't felt in decades. Was he finding a reason for her to return? Or was she reading too much into his professional courtesy? "I should get your contact information," she said suddenly, "in case I have questions about her care." He blinked, then reached into his pocket for a business card. "My cell is on the back," he said, writing on it before handing it to her. "Feel free to call anytime." Their fingers brushed again as she took the card, and this time, Eleanor didn't flinch. Outside, the early December day was crisp and clear. Eleanor placed Sunshine in the car and then stood for a moment, inhaling the cold air. On impulse, she took out the business card and looked at the handwritten number on the back. Beneath it, he'd added, "Even if it's not about the cat." Her heart performed a ridiculous little skip. That evening, as Eleanor prepared dinner, for one still, but no longer eating in silence with the television as her only company, she couldn't stop thinking about Daniel Martinez, about the kindness in his eyes when he spoke to her, about the possibility that hung in the air between them. "Am I being a fool, Sunshine?" she asked the cat, who was watching her cooking with interest from the countertop, a place Richard would never have allowed a pet. "I'm 62 years old. I was married for nearly 4 decades. I shouldn't be thinking about this." Sunshine blinked slowly at her, then deliberately knocked a pen off the counter. Eleanor laughed, a real laugh, one that bubbled up from someplace that had been frozen for too long. "You're right. Age is just a number." She picked up her phone and before she could lose her nerve, typed out a message to the number on the card. "Sunshine seems to miss you already. Would you like to come by for coffee sometime? Eleanor Wright." Her finger hovered over the send button. Was she being too forward? Was she misreading his friendliness? Was she betraying Richard's memory? The last question made her pause. She closed her eyes, trying to imagine what Richard would say about this moment, about her sitting in their kitchen, contemplating inviting another man for coffee. The Richard of her imagination smiled his crinkly-eyed smile and said, "Ellie, when did you ever let fear stop you from living?" Eleanor pressed send before she could change her mind. The response came faster than she expected. "I'd love that. How about Sunday afternoon? I promise not to examine your cat unless she requests it." Eleanor read the message 3 times, a smile growing on her face. She typed back, "Sunday would be perfect." 2 o'clock? "Looking forward to it," came the reply. Eleanor set her phone down, her heart pounding like a teenager's. "Well, sunshine?" she said to the cat, who was now grooming herself on the windowsill. "It seems we have a visitor coming." Sunday dawned bright and cold. Eleanor woke early, more nervous than she'd been in years. She changed her outfit twice, finally settling on the blue sweater and a pair of dark jeans that Claire had insisted she buy last Christmas. She baked muffins, cleaned the already clean house, and arranged fresh flowers in a vase on the coffee table. All the while, Sunshine watched with what seemed like amused tolerance. "I'm being ridiculous," Eleanor told her as she checked her reflection one last time. Her hair, more silver than brown now, was neatly styled. She wore minimal makeup, just enough to bring some color to her cheeks. "He's just coming for coffee. As a friend." The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. Eleanor took a deep breath and opened the door. Daniel Martinez stood on her porch, holding a small potted plant and looking as nervous as she felt. He'd traded his white coat for a dark green sweater and jeans. His salt and pepper hair was slightly windblown. "Hello," he said, smiling that crinkly-eyed smile that made Eleanor's heart flip. "I brought you a peace lily. They're supposed to be impossible to kill, even for those of us without green thumbs." Eleanor took the plant, their fingers brushing again. "Thank you. Please come in." Sunshine appeared as soon as Daniel stepped into the living room, weaving between his legs with a familiarity that made Eleanor raise her eyebrows. "She's usually shy with visitors. We have a special relationship," Daniel said, bending to stroke the cat. "Don't we, Miss Sunshine?" The afternoon passed in a blur of conversation. Eleanor learned that Daniel had been a vet for 15 years after a career change from corporate law, that he had a grown daughter in college, that he'd been divorced for 8 years and had moved to town 3 years ago to take over the practice from a retiring veterinarian. "I needed a fresh start," he explained as they sat in Eleanor's sunroom, the winter light filtering through the windows. The divorce was amicable, but Chicago held too many memories. Eleanor nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's how I felt about our house at first," she admitted. "After Richard died, every room seemed full of ghosts. I considered selling, but it's home," Daniel finished for her. "Yes." Eleanor looked around at the room Richard had built for her as an anniversary present, at the garden beyond where his roses still grew, "though it's beginning to feel like my home now, not just ours." "I think that's progress." Daniel's expression was thoughtful. "Grief changes shape over time, doesn't it? But it never really goes away." "No," Eleanor agreed softly. "And I wouldn't want it to. Grief is just love with nowhere to go." Daniel reached across the table and with gentle hesitation placed his hand over hers. "That's beautiful." And true. His touch was warm, steady. Eleanor found herself turning her hand to clasp his, a gesture so simple yet so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "I didn't expect this," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Any of it. Sunshine, you? Feeling alive again. The best things are often unexpected," Daniel said, his eyes holding hers, "like a stray cat in a storm." As he was leaving, Daniel paused at the door. "I enjoyed this," he said. "Very much." "So did I," Eleanor replied, surprised by how much she meant it. "There's a winter festival in the town square next weekend," he said, a question in his voice. "Would you like to go? With me?" Eleanor thought briefly of what people might think, the widow and the veterinarian stepping out together. Then she thought of how it had felt to sit across from Daniel, talking and laughing as the afternoon light faded. "I'd love to," she said. His smile lit up his entire face. "I'll call you with the details." After he left, Eleanor stood at the window, watching his car pull away. Sunshine jumped onto the sill beside her, purring loudly. "This is all you're doing, you know," Eleanor told her, stroking the soft gray fur. "If I hadn't found you that night." But she had found Sunshine, or Sunshine had found her, and now something new was beginning, something unexpected and fragile and full of possibility. Eleanor thought of Richard, of the love they had shared for 38 years. That love would always be part of her, a foundation rather than a barrier. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was room in her heart for something new to grow alongside it. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, dusting the garden where Eleanor had begun to clear space for spring planting. She stood at the window with Sunshine, watching as the world was transformed, one delicate flake at a time. A lonely widow had saved a stray cat, not realizing it would lead her to a new love. But standing there in the gathering twilight, Eleanor Wright realized that the cat had saved her too, had led her back to life, to possibility, to the courage to open her heart again. And that was a beginning worth embracing, however unexpected it might be.